Hello and welcome to the online panel on perspectives on European films culture, co-organized by FERA, Federation of European Screen Directors, and the 𝗘𝗱𝗵𝗃 Frankfurt International. My name is Henning Adam, and I co-planned the Congress Future German Film Forum Europe, 𝗘𝗂𝗶𝗁𝗄𝗿𝗄 of which this panel should have been a part. Due to the development of the pandemic and the related measures, we had unfortunately to postpone the Congress, which will now take place from May 11th to May 13th next year. We would like to invite you all to come to the Congress in Frankfurt. We are happy to be able to cooperate with FERA again in May. Before we are about to start, I want to say thank you very much to all the panelists for agreeing to participate in this round. Many thanks to Pauline Durand-Vial, the CEO of FERA, for moderating the discussion. I wish everyone an interesting and inspiring discussion.
Welcome and good evening. You are now the first panel that is organized by Lichter Film Festival, as you heard, and this is the first public panel of FERA's annual Congress, General Assembly 2021. This panel, as you heard, is called Perspectives on European Film's Future. And let me first introduce myself. I'm 𝗘𝗱𝗵𝗃. I'm filmmaker, film director from Slovenia, and also FERA chair. FERA is Federation of European Screen Directors. It's an organization of 49 organizations from more than 30 countries. So today, I will be hosting this with our CEO, Pauline Durand-Vial, and our panelists for today are Costa-Gavras, acclaimed filmmaker, film director, 𝗟𝗂𝗶𝗵, film producer and European Film Academy Deputy Chairwoman, Lucia Recalde, European Commission DG Connect, Deputy Director and Head of Unit Audiovisual Industry and Media Support Programs, and Edith Sepp, Estonian Film Institute CEO and European Film Agency Directors Association Vice President. Now I give the floor to Pauline Durand-Vial to set up the scene for today's panel.
Thanks, Clement. Indeed, so just to lay out a little bit the topic for discussion today, we thought it might be an interesting moment for us all to take stock of the massive changes that we've all experienced over the last couple of years within the audiovisual and film sector across Europe, which were obviously quite accelerated by the ongoing COVID-19 crisis, which is, as you know, the reason why we cannot have this discussion in an in-person hybrid format, but that we are coming to you today fully digitally and ready to rumble online. The few questions that we'll dive into will be about what is the space for filmmakers and independent players in this new landscape that we have to navigate today, what relationships we can build with European audiences in the future, and as a sort of a general topic for us to look into, how we can face these challenges together as a community of European filmmakers and industry players across the continent. And we will start with a general question to our panelists to stretch our legs a little bit, our digital legs, I guess. Basically, these changes that we've seen over the last couple of years have impacted every part of the sector, every policymaker out there. And the first question that we'll ask each of our panelists is basically what is their general impression on these changes, and maybe more specifically what struck them the most, observing the situation from their fairly unique standpoint. And we will start with Costa-Gavras with an opening answer to this very broad question. Costa, the floor is yours.
Yes, good evening to everybody, and thank you for inviting me. This is the first time, so I am proud and honored. And I will try with my so-so English. In French would be much better for me, but I try my English to tell my general vision about European cinema. We are all Europeans, we are all filmmakers. And what is to be a filmmaker? Of course, it's to make movies. But what is a movie? Some people about the past in Europe, they used to say that a movie, it's a product. Mr. Barroso started that. He was a bad man and a liar, but now it's changed a little bit. But some people keep saying that it's a product. We're not a product. We are not making products. We're making movies. A movie, it's an artwork. A movie, it's a way, probably the only way, to show in our society the invisible, to show the invisible in our societies and also in ourselves sometimes. So it's important for me to every country to have its own production, to have its own film system, starting from the production, the distribution, and of course the theaters. And there cannot be a national and of course international European movie without the help of the state. Of course, we have this help of the Europe with Eurimage, which is important. And I believe that should be much more larger, and the European Union should be not only, because with the European Eurimage, the European Union becomes a producer or a copy producer, but it's not a distributor. It has to be also in a certain way distributor. The distributor protects the freedom and in the movies, and also the authenticity and the personal, because a movie, it's a very personal thing that has to be helped, of course, and been shown also, been shown to other countries. I believe the European Union as a producer has to be also a distributor. How? I think it could be possible with asking to every country to show in his own television, national television channels, to show every month, if not every week, a European movie. It could be a major help first for us Europeans to meet other Europeans. We are Europeans, we don't know who the other Europeans also are and how they live. And also that could be a system like this, system of distribution through the channels, could be a way also to help these movies to be sold here and there, and to be economically a very important thing. That's in general terms my feeling about the European movies, and also to insist in the fact that we are making independent movies and also personal movies, because it's the most particular thing, I think, in the world cinema, that the European cinema generally, it is a very personal cinema, and it's essential to protect and to help that movement. And of course, I insist the fact that every country has to have its own cinema. And this depends also a lot of the European Union and also the Commission. Some people in the Commission are with us tonight, I believe, aren't they? So there has to be, to them, it must be very clear that that it's necessary to push every country to has his own cinema, and that, I repeat, it cannot be done without the will, I would say the political or the social will to have a national cinema. The state has to be behind its own cinema. So that's in general terms I would like to say to start, and I will be ready to continue later with more details.
Many thanks, Costa. You've said a lot already, and I think be it your point about singular voices of filmmakers bringing a unique mirror to each of our societies across the European Union that really chimes with all our membership, I'm sure, because that's the kind of discussions we've had this very morning with our entire gathering. So definitely this, plus of course public intervention at national and European level, the importance of cinema theaters for sure. And we'll talk a little bit more in details about the balance between production and distribution, particularly across the Union in a moment. Before we go to these particular points, let's move to Rebecca as a film producer actively engaged in the European landscape, as demonstrated by your commitment within the Film Academy. How have you lived through the last couple of years, and what struck you most, let's say?
Well, I'm like everyone else, I'm very grateful for this opportunity to talk, and really thank you for having me on the panel. I feel like I'm a bit of an imposter since Brexit has happened, and so the UK is very sadly no longer officially part of Europe, but we are part of Europe. We are physically part of Europe, and we are mentally part of Europe. And it's very, very important to us, even though we have, denied the administration. Many of us are still very upset about it. So not only have we had COVID, but we've also had Brexit. And this has a terrible, we don't know the overall effects of this yet, because COVID has sort of interrupted whatever if the initial effect of Brexit might be. But I can tell you from my perspective, it doesn't look great for the indigenous homegrown films that Costa is saying is so important. Our identity as countries and our identity as people thrives on our homegrown cinema. And I love the idea of the main TV channel in every country in Europe showing a European film at least once a month, if not once a week. I think it's a great idea, because we can see who else we are, who we are in Europe. And one of the things I love about being in Europe is the way the nationalities change and are so different. And yet you see, like, if you go to Odessa, you see a southern version of St. Petersburg, and you cross the continent and you see these wonderful changes. Anyway, I won't go on about that. I'll talk about the film industry in the UK. What has happened here after about 9 months of pandemic, when all production was delayed, we suddenly had this opportunity to make films because of an insurance scheme. And that meant that suddenly everything went into production. And because we have a very good tax credit here, but also because we speak English in this country, we have now become a very important outpost of Hollywood. So half of our industry is actually the American industry, which lives around London and uses the streamers, and the Hollywood studios use our studios in the UK, which are all around London, as outposts of Hollywood. And so suddenly everything went into production, and it's like we've had 150% of production. And what has happened is that every technician is working, every assistant is being raised to a level that they are not experienced with. Every actor is working, and the indigenous industry, which is what I'm part of, is sort of floundering around, finding that the prices for everything, the incredible inflation, there's a lot going on that makes it very difficult for us to make our own contribution, because there is an industry that's very busy, but it's not the national indigenous industry. And we feel that the national industry is really important because it tells us who we are, rather than telling us that we are an exciting alien or a superhero. And so we have this, I'm hoping that it will gradually die down, the inflation will drop, because at the moment it's very difficult to get our voices heard as independent filmmakers. And I'm trying to put films together at the moment, but the cost of our budgets is going up because people are so difficult to pin down. And the pandemic and Brexit have caused severe shifts in our industry in the UK, and I'm worried about that. And even though Brexit has happened, I am still doing European co-productions.
Well, thanks for that, 𝗂𝗶𝗃. I think what you're talking about in terms of pressure on the local industry is something that also chimes with our membership quite a lot. Again, this morning we talked about the very same challenge which is put to our members. Full employment in certain areas of Europe is a wonderful thing, but it also comes with a terrible price, which is twofold, at least from what they were discussing this morning, our members. And one is that the working conditions are degrading as fast as you can imagine, including on productions that you would think have sufficient means to provide in a way for a secure framework. And of course, as you described, this incredible pressure on talent availability for more singular works is definitely something that we've observed in different areas of Europe. I think let's move to Edith without delay. From your perspective in Estonia, how have you lived through the last couple of years, and what struck you?
It's very interesting. I also want to start with a thank you for including me to this wonderful panel, and it's a great honor and such a distinguished people involved. You know, I don't know if I have anything to say at all, but I try. Well, from my point of view, I think the crisis it does have many faces, and some good things came out of the crisis too for us. I think we in Estonia, but in generally, I think many of the film funds in Europe, we tried to introduce totally new schemes, and we definitely increased the scholarships to the creators. I don't think we would have looked into this increasing numbers of the scholarship before, or we would have not turned our faces towards the creators the same way. But this crisis did give us this overview that if you take away the work from the film directors, for example, and they can't go and write a book or an article to the journal or do some ads and commercials, what they do have to do between the projects, then what they are going to do? You know, there is no income for the film directors in Estonia if we don't support them. And we started to look much closer to the Filmmakers Union, and we increased the scholarships 5 to 6 times. And then when this crisis, you know, we do have some time when the crisis is on a lower level, and I talked to the film directors in Estonia, then I think the feedback what I got was that it was the first time when they could actually think and concentrate on their projects. But was a totally new approach, because we have really speeded up the process of giving the financing, and as soon as you finish one project, you have to start thinking about the next project, and you put so much pressure on our creators, and you don't really give them time to take time off between the projects. And this was the first time when they actually could do it. And in this way, I don't want to say that the crisis is a great thing to happen for us to realize it. But in many ways, yes, we started to take time off and think what we are doing, the way we give financing to the films and why we give it, and what happens to our creators in the meanwhile, especially to the film directors. Because, you know, the technical crew, they can always go. And as Rebecca said, that, you know, when the hardest period in production was over, then a lot of projects started to come in, and it's the same in Estonia, that the cash projects, so the subcontracting increased heavily in every country, and the technical people did get some work, but the film directors, even the script writers, you know, they were left alone. So yeah, to think about that, we have the people on the market who don't get any support if we don't help them. I think for fun, but it was quite a revelation.
So it's indeed something we've observed as well during this crisis period, how this interruption of work made a lot of, I think, of the people we speak to, both at the political level, but also even within the industry, realize that the workflow for filmmakers, particularly for screenwriters and directors, is quite unique. And actually, these furlough schemes that were being deployed in some countries to help people survive in these moments where they did not have work also showed that the social security setup and the socioeconomic situation of these individuals is so peculiar that they really risk they risk their livelihood in staying in these jobs in a crisis moment. And it was really, I mean, it's really great that it comes from you also as a representative of a film agency, that you've felt that a reality coming through you during the crisis. This was not an easy period for anybody, but I think if we can agree that we came to a few realizations during this period, it's not wasted time for sure. Let's move to Lucia, and from your perspective as a representative here of the European Commission and who is like me in Brussels, well, how did you see these 2 years from the perspective of the institution, and what struck you the most also?
Well, first, Pauline, let me thank FERA for having invited me to this event. I'm really delighted to be here with you today. So the 2 years were difficult. I don't need to explain it to you, because you know better than anyone else that the pandemic has profoundly affected the whole audiovisual ecosystem. So the COVID crisis really has hit the audiovisual ecosystem very, very hard, especially the production, but also cinema exhibition. So the two main elements I think that I would like to mention here that is the speed at which the industry is changing. And I would like, if you allow me to answer to Costa-Gavras, that for the European Commission, we are speaking about art and industry, because there is no art without industry, but there is no industry without art. So this is why the principles that inform what we do is first cultural diversity, but also a thriving and competitive industry. So what I wanted to say is that things are changing at really a speed light. Adaptation to adapt to something that is constantly changing. We had our media program in place, and we had really to look at the possibilities to adapt it to what we were witnessing with, and it was not that evident. So I think one lesson is that perhaps we need more flexibility to adapt to something that we don't know, and as I said, is changing dramatically. And the second element, you all know this extremely well, is the growing importance or even the dominance on non-European global platforms. So clearly the result of COVID is that the non-European VOD players have expanded their audiences significantly, especially the young audiences, and potentially, I would say, accelerating the shift from traditional broadcasting or cinema to VOD streaming. And this raises a lot of questions. The question is whether this is disrupting the well-established European model, relying on independent creation, independent production, independent distribution. And I think there are particularly a lot of questions regarding the impact on independent producers and intellectual property. Because again, VOD platforms can certainly be an opportunity for creators, but can also be a challenge. And we think also that especially when it comes to some IP practices, this could lock in producers and talents with platforms. So I don't think there is, perhaps we don't have a magic recipe to address those challenges. And I want to tell Rebecca that what she has explained, I think that also we have seen that in the continent, prices going up. But we think that perhaps we need to reinvent truly European collaboration models among creators, producers, broadcasters, and across the whole value chain, because that will be the only way if we play at continental level, if you are European and really scale up at European level, that will be the only way to really face this growing competition for these non-European platforms.
Thanks, Lucia. That's very interesting. I'm sorry, you see me going with this logic of trying to repeat some of the elements that were mentioned. I think in what Lucia said, what's I find particularly interesting, this sort of also a realization that some flexibility might be in order in these very challenging times of change. I think that's really an important point. And also, of course, what you're describing of this observation we all have, that audiences, particularly in this moment in time where we're still in crisis, have a tendency to go towards online solutions. That is something that our sector needs to address as well, because we don't, I think collectively we can say that we don't believe that online exploitation is the only solution to the issue of the distribution and circulation of European works, also because we know that cinema is carried very well on a big screen, and that is also what carries the reputation for the film and a number of things that trickle down afterwards. But your point is well heard, of course, on the indie production and IP issues and this sort of lock-in phenomenon that we can feel with these new global streamers on the market. That's I think something we can all observe at our different levels. And this needs to reinvent European collaboration we completely share. The notion that scaling up is necessarily the perfect answer to this situation, I think, however, we will discuss a little bit more. But let's maybe move on to the second round of question, and there I will pass the floor to Clement.
Yeah, in second round, we would try to identify stakes and needs for the European audiovisual creative industry. So I, as a filmmaker, I see for me, one of the most important things is artistic freedom and creative space for an author or a filmmaker to have, as industry changes and this impact on a creation across Europe. So why does it matter, artistic freedom and creative space? What is at stake if this freedom and artistic freedom and creative space is getting smaller? And what needs to happen to preserve artistic freedom and creative space for European audiovisual creators or filmmakers? I see, Costa, you described before in your first round something like I had this idea that filmmaking could be this sustainable and local industry as agriculture or something, and it can be treated as agriculture, you know, because we want to eat locally, we want to eat fresh, we want to eat healthy, and food for soul, art can be grown locally and sustainably. Maybe can you maybe a little bit expand on this? Why does artistic freedom and creative space matter?
I would like to say something. Lucia said about which an industry. Of course, it's an industry, but we're making prototypes.
We are a startup.
Which is the fact for the art. The other thing I would like to say that we speak about the pandemic problem, but there's a major problem being present right now and since a few years in Europe are the platforms. The platforms, the tendency of the platforms are to legalize the cinema completely, to make them, they producing movies with major directors, very known directors, and they leave apart the directors who are doing very personal movies, and movies, author movies, let's call it, or smaller movies. I don't believe a movie like the one who was awarded in the last Venice Festival, the event, could be produced by these guys, by the platforms. It is being produced by independent producers, small producers, and that's a small movie, but it's a major movie to exist in our society. It's not, the audience don't run after the movie, but it's important that movie to exist. So the major problem has, and the union has today, to try to see how we cooperate with these platforms, which are a kind of historical problem. They are there, but at the same time, it's a social problem, an economical problem. So we cannot leave them without intervening to try to change them, to get closer to our way of producing movies. Because after a while, it was a kind of legalized movies, the ones were chosen by people who don't care about how many people go to the movies. Their own, let's say, project, it's not cultural project, it's economical project. They work, they don't care how many people go to see the movie. They are interested about how many people pay every month to see the movies they would like to show. And I think the European Union has to collaborate with all the countries to see what can be the solution to keep our movies, our productions be free and our distribution be different from the ones they propose to us. And that's, I think, a part, of course, the pandemic problem, which is a problem will go away in a few years, in a few months or a few years, let's hope. But the platforms are here forever, unless for tens and tens of years. And it has to do something, and particularly the European Union and the Community.
I'd like to add something here. I like the agricultural metaphor that Ǩēman has brought into this, and I think that the danger of factory farming is homogenization, and I think that is the way of making it absolutely clear. And we have to understand, oops, there's the factory farm just walking past, that the indigenous storytelling that we do from our own countries it's like the research and development. It's like specialized feed being developed. I think this intellectual specialization, it's so important. It's like you can make the equivalent to climate issues. It's like without the enrichment that individual ideas coming from personal stories and new people, you end up with this, the lowest common denominator, and you have the economic model of factory farming is that you get the most possible product, and it goes. I think that the streaming and the globalization is really dangerous, because it means that it's like fertilizer on everything. It doesn't let the interesting weeds grow, and it doesn't allow for the fields to have a fallow year. And it's so greedy, it can only ultimately eat itself. That's my feeling. So we need the independent sector to be strong. And the only way I think we can do that is for local, regional, and national support must understand the vitalness of its role in making interesting intellectual lives possible.
Yeah,
I don't have any sound. I don't know if you can listen to me.
We can
hear you.
We can hear you, absolutely. Maybe if you want to, this is a small technical pause, people. Maybe you can disconnect and reconnect if you want to try and plug in sound again, Costa. But in any case, we'll be here, and if you can hear us, we can hear you. So maybe, I think you've mentioned a couple of pretty crucial things here. This notion that Costa was describing of that when a global streamer produces cinema films that are very visible and well identified, you shall know stunt for the service to look good in promoting certain types of films and certain filmmakers, but it's not really a structural thinking about promoting singular voices across the world. That's not what we're talking about. It's a different business model and a different intent. And what you're describing, 𝗂𝗶𝗃, as the right complement to this approach being through public funding and a determination by policymakers to supplement this idea that this industry is not only fertilized in a way, that it must retain this local flavor is really necessary. Costa?
I do not have any sound. I don't know if you can listen to me.
We hear you. We hear you.
We hear you. I'm not sure how to address this. I'll try and parallel
communication. Okay.
Yeah. But let's try and get this sorted. Maybe if we move to Edith.
Yeah, can I address one thing maybe here? Costa said that one of possible also analogies would be that we are making prototypes. So it's impossible to scale our product, as we said before, and it should stay like that. It's indeed a research and development. We are a research and development for basically pushing our creative industry forward. So maybe on that topic, Edith can say how film funds and public support can be how is the introduction of these new global players in national ecosystems going, and what is the balance between the development and entertainment industry, and maybe what is the position of indie sector, how smaller production countries are doing in this context.
Yes, I wanted to also comment on Rebecca that when it comes to the film funds who are all gathered under this umbrella EFADs, and I think when it comes to the smaller film funds, we definitely think about national cinema, and also it's a comment to Costa that a primary reason for being is to support our local language, cinema, and culture. This is the only reason why we produce films, why we support the films. We don't actually produce; we give the support to the films to be produced, and we never forget it. We never forget it. But the scene in the film sector is much larger than the national cinema, unfortunately. And I remember a few years ago when we only had this national support.
Yes,
we were not surviving. We had to bring in, for example, the cash rebate so that the people in the film industry could work more and get the experience what these games.
J'arrête tout et je recommence.
Sorry, Edith, sorry. Can the administrator? Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, Edith, go on.
To equalize an internal market, that we need to feed our people also via the subcontracts and the cash rebate projects in order to keep actually national cinema alive. But we constantly bear in mind that this is our main task in our lives, to keep the national cinema alive. So, losing our language and our cinema is a bigger loss, for example, or it's more noticeable than in the bigger countries. But in long term, I think we do have to really think that all the players on Europe, what is called Audiovisual Media Services Directive, what gives us the opportunity to kind of give the obligations to the different players on the market so that they would do the investment into the national production. And most film funds are look very closely how to introduce these implementations and how to put the obligations to the streamers so that they would invest into the local production. And 14 countries already have done this. They have introduced these rules, and even the countries what is more to north, like Baltic states, but also Scandinavia, even we are looking into the putting the obligations to the streamers who are showing the films in our market. So I do think that the national film funds take their responsibility very seriously, and we don't really let the things just go out of hand, but we try to get more money into the local production. And film funds also look very closely and into the intellectual property rights. We are not making the rules that, you know, any kind of streamer or the streamer for the producer for the streamer can come and apply for selective funding from our funds. We do take a responsibility that the rights are preserved for a national producer or independent producer. So yes, we don't let them the rules to go out of hands in many ways. And you know, during the crisis, I would also like to say that we do think about the audience. We do think about the cinemas, and we do support them. You know, each country had their own mitigating measures to support for the survival of the cinemas. And it is cinema we can see as a house, but we also thought about the people and the audience who is going to see our films. And we did our best to keep them at least coming back, or keeping in mind that the cinema does exist. So, but obviously the crucial role is on EU and the media program. And, you know, and the many opportunities what the media program gives us across the Europe rather than only on the national level.
Thanks, Edith. Clement, do you want to follow up, or shall we?
No,
okay.
Maybe now is the time to give the ball to
Lucia. Yes, indeed, because it's true that you've got a few things coming your way, and I think in a way all this boils down to the vision that the European Commission has for our sector, looking to the future, and what this notion of global competitiveness really means, and how it articulates with what we've just described. But Lucia, go ahead, the floor is yours.
Well, if I can start on the media program, I think it's very important to acknowledge the effort that the Commission has made to increase its budget. Rebecca, it's a pity now that you cannot apply for the media program, because we are much richer than we used to be in the past. We got an increase that, if we compare EU27 alone, amounts to 80% increase. So 1.5 billion for the audiovisual industry. So it's a significant increase, and the increase was an acknowledgement of the role played by the audiovisual industry, not only, I would say, as an industry, but also in times of COVID crisis. It was important, the reflex of our societies and the importance of cultural diversity. So I think all these elements were recognized by the Commission through this huge increase in the budget. I think now perhaps what we need to do is to work and think about better alignment of national and regional support and European support. Media is there to help the internationalization of creators, producers that are already active at national level. So we really boost them, their international careers, so they can really consider the European Union and even beyond as their home natural playground, I would say. But I think sometimes making the transition between the regional and national level and the European, when it comes to these complex co-productions, is not a smooth process. And perhaps we all have the obligations to see how can we make the different requirements a bit easier for those that are going to be directing a film or producing a movie. Because I said we all love co-productions, but then in the end, if the film has to be shot in my country and we need X percentage of activity that happens in a given country, then that makes things for the creators much more complicated. And I think that when COVID has shown, for example, that perhaps we need to think about altogether about co-productions in a different way. What matters is not the number of technicians or days that are going to be spent in my country, because there will be perhaps more virtual activities happening. So perhaps there is a collective responsibility to think how to thrive European co-productions in this new post-COVID pandemic era. And the second element I wanted to mention is the audiences, because I think, Edith, you mentioned it. I think the platforms, we can criticize them, but they have been really good at really engaging with the audiences. And perhaps we don't need to do the same because we have our own identity, but we really must make an effort not only to think about the content, but how we are going to engage with the audiences so they really enjoy that truly European content that reflects what we are. And I think here again, on the media side, with the media program, we are taking much more actions from festivals, cinemas, VOD platforms, film education to really create that connections between our wonderful content and our citizens. But I think more needs to be done in this respect.
Yeah. Maybe one reflection on that. I was thinking when you said about media, we are observing this, or in FERA, we were always keen for these programs to emerge in media that would make local, regional filmmakers across the borders and become European or even international filmmakers. And it seems, as we observe it, that's the hardest for especially for film directors. It's really, really hard in Europe to cross the border. And it seems when you look across the board, there is really not a lot of programs that would help European film directors, television directors to cross national borders. We have one beautiful example in Poland, 𝗥𝗲𝗶𝗃, which is a fabulous program, but it's basically almost the only program like that in European Union. There will be a really big opportunity for next media program, next period, to really increase, because screenplay development, production development programs are really rich, and there are a lot of them, but developing exactly film directors' visions, creative space, artistic freedom for film directors is really scarce. So, and on the other hand, the other thing, maybe to reply to Lucia, as pandemic hit, local organizations, we observed in FERA that that our networking really helped us and saved us in this period. Sharing information on how to approach things was essential for survival of local communities, local industries, and it's hard not to see that big audiovisual culture industries like Americans or South Americans are there. One of the essential things they are doing is they have strong networks like FERA, like FSA, like EFADs, and the whole system is helping for those structures to be bigger, better, and stronger. And it seems that sometimes Europe is too much. European Commission is too much focusing on particular solutions, which are really good for distribution and for visibility to European works, for project development, but not and missing some of the targets that are also essential to make European audiovisual space really pop up and be the leader in creative industry in the world.
I think this, before moving to you, Rebecca, this has to do with how we envisage this sort of deployment, also not only for the industry within Europe, but also internationally. Having an international vision supposes some very heavy structuring or restructuring internally within the single market, and how these collaborations can be built in a way that makes really sense. Rebecca, you raised your hand.
I just wanted to mention, I mean, I think that the audience development thing is really important in this. And I think that the pan-European attempts to build a younger audience is really important. I mean, one of the things that we do at the European Film Academy is the Young Audience Award, which is a wonderful thing. And it's grown exponentially in the few years it's been going. It started off in like 3 countries and now it's in sort of 40 or 50 countries. And it's amazing because it brings together young people from cities all over Europe, and they watch 3 films, all from different, which are chosen, and they vote on them. And it's really a good involvement. And I think those sort of initiatives really begin to develop an audience, but they're too small. It feels like there needs to be something like that which really catches on in a big way. And I think that's why I thought that Costa's point about using the national broadcasters, that felt like an important idea, that some commitment by local by national broadcasters to indigenous European cinema is a way forward. I just wanted to say that while we're still talking about all this.
Costa and then Edith. Sorry, Edith, if I skipped you. Go ahead.
Who, me?
Oh no, well, go ahead. Now that you have the floor, Costa, you're next.
So, I just wanted to say this with this audiovisual media directive, there is a prominence for European films. You have to show, the television has to show minimum 30% European content. So
sadly not in the UK.
50-50.
We can't actually access your channels. We would do the best to do that, but we can't really tell them what to show. But there is inside European Union, there is a must to show certain percentage of the European works, but it could be always more prominent, and it could always curated also. I think the curation, we are on this stage already, then you show the films, and the younger generation doesn't really understand profoundly what this film is all about. So curation also in cinemas, in television, I don't think it's even so much television and cinemas, curated programs, very necessary to be introduced. So yeah, we try to do that. But I think, yes, our emphasis, the film funds, or I'm talking more about myself, because I somehow during the crisis, I became very close to our local film directors. And I'm just very worried about it. I think they represent all the film directors in Europe that, because this development and the changing the scenery or the market is so fast, that can they really stay? Can they really keep their skills, with the small amount of films that what they are creating in, let's say, in 5 years' time, they can do 1.5 films. How long can you stay competitive with this kind of production capacity? And I'm very worried about our European directors, because these are the people who actually create our films.
Well, I can tell you that worry is shared by themselves to some extent. But Costa, you wanted to come in? Go ahead.
To come in because I lost a lot of speeches. Sorry for a while, but the last one I heard was about audiences. I think it's very important. I think Lucia said kind of number of possibilities to attract audiences. I believe personally, and I insist here in France very strongly, that the movies, the cinema, be taught in the schools. To start for young people, that we're teaching them music, I believe, everybody. We're teaching theater and literature. But cinema is something so important. Images are everywhere in our society, starting with television, for telephone, and on the streets. And the young people, the children and the students has to learn how to make a choice about what picture has to be seen, what movie has to be seen. And the only way is to teach them at the school, the cinema. And of course, show them movies from the past, from the beginning, the most important movies. And I think they will be, at the beginning, they won't like that very much because they're black and white. But after a while, my own experience, because I did a little bit that in a small town, they like very much the black and white movies. You show every child the Charlie Chaplin's movie, the Le Temps Moderne, Modern Times. At the beginning, they don't like it. At the end, they're very happy to watch it again and again. I think there's a major problem to start from there. because it's an art which will be, the images, it's an art will be in our lives forever, whatever we do, whatever done.
That's a critical point, isn't it? To find ways to connect with these younger audiences, but actually all audiences, and give them a taste of what different and good can be. In many ways, that's something that is quite difficult to do, and indeed public intervention has always been critical in doing this work. I know that a lot of filmmakers who are involved in these media literacy initiatives at national level tend to love interacting with these classes and really have a chance to talk about what the image really is. So I think that's something that we can all agree to, and I do believe that there are a lot of national and European initiatives actually already in existence, but maybe there is something there to dig into further in terms of really deploying this as a strategy in a way, something that is really actually front and center in building European tastes for our own reflection, which is sometimes a little bit challenging. I don't know, Lucia, if you want to comment on this.
Well, I would like really to tell you about two initiatives that we are implementing. One next week, implemented by Europa Cinema, but it's called European Cinema Nights. And we started more modestly with 30 cinemas all over Europe. And next week, there will be more than 70 cinema theaters all over Europe that will connect, and we will screen European movies. The cinema exhibitors themselves choose the movie they wish for different reasons. Could be, I would say, heritage movie or a new one, and they bring either they organize panels, conversations around the movie, because we know this is going to attract people. And what has been super, super rewarding for us is to see that the cinemas exhibitors were thrilled and completely committed to this. So now we have, as I said, more than 75 cinemas, not only in big capital cities. We wanted to go to smaller cities all over Europe. And I think that's a very good way to connect with audiences. Another initiative we promoted, we call the Season of Classics. So we try to give a second life to the big classics of the European cinema. And I can tell you that seeing, I don't know, 3,000 people in the open air Thessalonica watching an old movie, it's really a kind of lifetime experience. So these are things that are very concrete, as well as the initiatives that European Film Academy is implementing, but we think that can help create this connection between European citizens and European content and creators.
Thanks, Lucia. I think it's, interestingly enough, maybe this would be a sort of a first step into thinking of what this global competitiveness objective could mean for cinema, what the potential of this notion means for cinema. Is there something along the line of a soft power ambition of the European Union projecting itself in the world, where we have a wealth of cinema creations, both, hopefully still alive tomorrow, but also from the past heritage that we have? Is there something there that we could explore because global competitiveness of audiovisual content sounds a lot like what type of content the audience will like de facto, or we think they will like, and there is a bit of an industrial planned obsolescence logic to it potentially that, of course, for cinema is not valid because it has nothing to do with the way you will develop and produce a singular work. Is there something there that we could build together as an industry? I mean, the European Film Academy on the one end, our networks, of course, a political ambition for the European Union in that sort of projection internationally. I don't know, Edith, I see you nodding. Is that something that chimes with you, or
yes,
feels a bit artificial?
I think the film funds could be included, or we could sit down and think about something, and then yes, I think it would have a future definitely, as the film literacy in general is quite close to our hearts in general, and yeah, I think so.
How we build the the film heritage of tomorrow in a way by fostering our cinema creation today, ain't it?
Yes. Well, you know, this during the crisis, you know, we asked our film directors also to start to do the video diaries for the next generation, you know, because well, we are not all here forever, and the crisis gave us so much time on our own, and we asked them also, we gave a small amount of money so that they would collect their own video diaries about how they felt at the time when they did their film, and it was quite interesting. It was a little bit complicated also to get this all done and shoot. You know, sometimes they asked the cameraman to come to their flat and shoot, but you know, when they could do it, you know, to remembering what is the creation period as such, because we start to forget. We just think it's quite mechanical. You just put the film together and it's going to run on the screen, but there is a huge thinking process behind it, and people don't know anything about it. So to describe it in words, how you felt and what did you do and why did you do this or that, you know, it opened up what is the director's work, what is the creation process as such, and people were very interested in the schools, especially to play and show it to the pupil.
If I may, we are already doing things because we are organizing European film festivals in all the EU delegations all over the world with a curated catalog. So this is an action that we have already been implementing for a number of years. So we certainly from the European Union all over the world. But I think the is not because Rebecca is here, because the media program has been supporting the Academy, I would say, since the very beginning. I hope we will keep doing this in the future. I mean, we have European Film Awards. So is this not something we could all work? Because that embodies perhaps the best of European cinema of a given year. To what extent could these films that are awarded by the Academy be promoted more widely? It's an open question that I have for you, but certainly I believe that the Academy has a lot of leeway, power, and I would say legitimacy through the awards to really bring those films more widely all over the world.
On behalf of the Academy, it's interesting because it has different perceptions. The European Film Academy is perceived differently in different countries, and sadly it has little traction here in the UK. I mean, I don't know why the UK is so in such denial about being European. Maybe they'll get over it soon, but they keep on thinking that they're American, and I find that very difficult. But I think that one of the problems we have with the European Film Academy is that often the films which go into the commercial sphere are the ones that are voted for. We always try and make sure that there's a broad range of films for everybody to see when they're members of the Film Academy who vote. But I don't think, I think we need to have a more outward-facing presence. And I think one of the new ideas we have is to have a European Film Week around the awards. And we need that to be in every European country so that we actually make it more outward-facing rather than, one of the problems with all of these awards things is that they're very sort of internal industry things. We need to spread it further afield, and we need support for that to go, you know, for European cinemas in the cities all around Europe to really catch on to that. And I think a European Film Week in cities all over Europe at the same time as the awards would definitely help focus. So there are initiatives that we are looking at the moment and trying to find ways of, sorry, my cat is playing roulette now. It's terrible. So I hate this awful noise that's going on in the background. Apologies.
Well, your point is well made, none the same. Edith, go ahead.
Rebecca, is there European films in UK planned the same way?
If only I could say absolutely. I mean, there are lots of cinemas that really do support European product, and there are distributors here who are, you know, continue to support. But I think it's an uphill struggle here. And it's always the small cinemas and the independent cinemas who are the ones that support European films. And it's the bigger cinemas that we have more problems with. And I think, and Brexit doesn't help. I mean, we need to get over the pandemic and find our way around Brexit, really, to go back to being more European again. I'm sure the desire is there. It's just we have to all realize the error of our ways and how bad Brexit is.
My last promotion on Estonian film is that we did have the screenings this Saturday and Sunday, and the cinema hall was full of people, what became as a great surprise to us, because even our cinemas are not full. And Estonian films in London and full hall.
It's all about marketing, and if it's done well, and if it's done to the right communities and selectively, then you will always have an audience in places like London. It's just that depends on how good the cinemas are as well. And again, the small independent cinemas, bless them, are always the best at getting the right audience in there, because they care, they really care, and the people who work in those cinemas really care about the audience, and we need to support them as much as possible, I think, and applaud their efforts.
Wanted to come in, go ahead.
I would like to comment a word you said before. You said about create the taste for movies, the taste for European cinema. We have a taste for the American movie. We go automatically to the American movies. Years ago, my generation didn't go to the Korean movies. After a while, the Koreans, I don't know how, they created the taste for the Korean movies, and we go to see the Korean movies. Of course, there is an extraordinary example with Koreans, because the Korean government, will you say it, but probably, if you say it about it, stop me, this obliged the theaters, the Korean theaters, for 100 days every year to show Korean movies. And they created the Korean cinema. It was as simple as that. So I think probably we should find a way to create a kind of taste for the European movies, because when I have possibilities, French Cinematheque, to see here and there different movies and European movies, it's amazing the discoveries I'm doing, and the audience there, they've come out very happy, like me, because we discovered something important and different. That does not exist in Europe, or it's very, very small. We should try to, I don't know how to do it, but we should try to create a bigger space for the European movies everywhere. I spoke before about televisions, of course, a way, but it could be also through the theaters, because you don't see in the theaters European movies either. Why? We have thousands of theaters, and we show always the same movie. Sometimes you have a movie, an action movie, American or whatever action movie, is there for weeks, and very little people go to see it, and they don't change it. I don't know why, because there is taste.
That's the distributors. I mean, that's the problem we have. We can't. The distributors just push out smaller films by insisting that they have to have their film on in so many cinemas. It's a real problem, and it's an economic situation that only our central governments can really deal with. We have to make impositions to change it. That's the free market that is allowing studios to buy the space in cinemas, and they say, if you don't give over 7 screens to this film, we won't let you have this bigger film that's coming along, which will fill those screens. I think it's a huge problem, and it's the problem of globalization.
I think you're making a very important point, is that there was already an economic dynamics about theatrical release before the pandemic, but now we are in a situation which is even more challenging in many ways, where we know that distributors and theaters are under massive pressure, and that when you try to get out of a crisis, of course, at first you're going to take the films that are available, but then after a while you're going to want to go for what you consider an easy solution to fill in your seats, right? So it's quite a challenging moment when and you know, like me, that everybody says something that sounds like an obligation. Everybody cringes right now. We already cringed before, but I think now everybody's cringing even more. And if you can argue around it in a way that makes sense for the entire value chain, it helps. You've all pointed out to one particular point, which is that there is something about being on a sort of quest to conquer eyeballs within Europe itself more than ever, because we know that people are changing their behavior in seeking films or other types of audiovisual contents, that TV series also take a lot of your time. And then once you're in a bit of an automatic mode of consumption for this kind of food, you might become less and less curious. And how do you challenge that change in taste, which is really fast and accelerating, but also how do you curate what you put forth? Because making things available is not enough, and actually conquering these audience has a price in terms of marketing. Rebecca, you were talking about smart promotional approach by some theaters, but actually it's across the value chain. If you were thinking about putting forth any type of work online, you would have exactly the same challenge of having to really take your little 𝗘𝗂𝗿𝗃 and sort of just go up the mountain one bit by bit. And this is something that probably we all need to think about, how promotion has become so important, and editorialization and a real strategy behind works. And maybe distributors, which are now in a number of countries calling themselves publishers, are doing this work of putting things forth and trying to really make everybody recognize their position in the value chain as quite essential. I'm not sure how that factors in really, but it's quite critical. And maybe some things about balancing support, production, distribution, theatrical exploitation where it needs to, but a balance between these things for cinema, but also for the wider range of audiovisual works that are now being supported by public money. How we find balance also between cinema works and audiovisual works. I know there is no difference from a legal standpoint in European texts, but there is a difference potentially in artistic and cultural value, and how we create this nuance. I'm not sure. Edith, I saw you shaking your head.
I'm just thinking that it's a combination of things, isn't it? And you have to really deal with the younger audience, and this audience building, what Rebecca was mentioning before. So and it's not it's combination of things together with this curating the programs, talking about the films and writing about the things. We totally forget about the good articles or this kind of analysis about films. This comes more. We sort of lost the skill to write good articles or look deeper. We just fly over the films and give them an overview, just what happened as a subject matter in a film, rather than analyzing of the director's vision or anything like this. It's such a combination of things, but what is truth is also that we can't change the changed market. I think we have to think why audience is there, and if we want to change it, then it's a work for many years. Nothing happens over years. We always seem to we talk more about this, that what we need to do, but in the meanwhile we should really, especially in the national funds, and I should really look into the mirror, but we should really start with something and not be afraid that changes might take few years to be in place, but start from somewhere. And I am a great believer on the film education and taking it to the schools.
I think you're absolutely right. It is the and Costa too, the idea of having cinema on the school curriculum is actually a no-brainer. It seems to me that that's a fundamentally good idea that is a genuinely active way of getting younger people to understand what cinema is, and how because images have become the central thing in our lives. I mean, every child has access to Instagram. Instagram in its very name is about instant pictures. And so we're a very, cine literate world. But if we are not taught cinema in the way that we are taught literature, how can we respond to it in a broader way? And I think you were talking about criticism and writing about cinema. I think it's so important that it's a central subject now, because it's become, in our lifetimes, it has become the predominant form of communication. It's visual communication. So we must learn it. We must understand, we must be taught some of it. We can't just be given it, chucked at us all the time. We, as children, how do we choose? How do we learn how to interpret if we are not supported by teachers? So I think the education, that's what I would take out of this particular discussion more than anything else, is education.
I find that really interesting if you connect this idea with what Lucia was talking about in terms of better interaction between national, regional, local, and European initiatives. Because some of, when we talk about education, some aspects of these policies are definitely not in the remit of the European Commission. Same thing with certain aspects of cultural policy. The European institutions, which are embodied by Lucia in this conversation, have a set of competences, but not all of them. And maybe it falls back on us as industry representatives to build a platform of what we feel is absolutely necessary for the future of European cinema, and to bring it to the right people at the right time, because at some point, we cannot always turn to Lucia or a commissioner or the European institution to solve our problems. However, it is equally critical that the picture that we are painting is absorbed also by the institutions, both at national and European level. And I think at this moment of crisis, it has become a bit difficult to talk as a common voice for this sector. And that is probably what we will strive to build together for the future, to make sure that this part of our industry, which is so critical from a cultural standpoint, remains its heart, both industrially, but also culturally. And that's not a given, I think, in a way. I don't know, Lucia, if you have any thoughts on that, but...
Well, I would like to come back to something you said, because this has not been, I think, discussed enough. And when we speak about prominence, visibility, marketing, I think here perhaps this is a shared responsibility between the creators, the producers, the distributors. Sometimes when we speak, everyone agrees that promotion is very important, but we start speaking and say, well, it's important, but it's not me. And I think perhaps we need to realize that promotion starts very, very, very early at creation stage, and that today there are perhaps new means to do this promotion in a more targeted manner, using, why not, social media, using, why not, data, using more digital techniques. I know that perhaps from a creator side, this might be a bit far away from you, but we have seen wonderful results. I'm thinking about the movie, it was Van Gogh movie, a wonderful Polish animated movie, I think UK Polish co-production. And it was a 25-year-old that did all the marketing with absolutely, from the UK actually, with wonderful results, engaging with communities. And for me, that was a kind of eye-opening exercise that sometimes you need to, especially if you want to connect with the younger audiences, it's not just, we need also to understand how they communicate, how they engage, and perhaps try to use the means they use to try to promote the content. And I don't want to sound too patronizing, educate them. So, and here I think there is a lot of untapped potential to really do more on the marketing. So I call marketing promotion over so far.
You make a fair point. I think at the same time, we know that distributors have built strategies to target audiences through digital media for quite some time now, and it's been something that we've actually discussed within our network a couple of times. How filmmakers sometimes need to become designers of their own brands to carry projects and to make the most of some of these strategies that are designed by distributors and to target audiences. But at the same time, we also know that just as a matter of fact, I don't know if you know, but filmmakers are not paid to promote their works in Europe. And that is a massive amount of work to build, and that we actually as a community, I don't think have approached until now, not because we're not aware of it, and some people, believe you me, but it's not a great further. And I think it goes back to this idea that collaboration within the industry is how we build these new ways to work. And I'm not going to say networking activities, Lucia, don't worry, but that's it has to do with that. When Clement was talking about ambitions for this industry to be better organized, there is also something there in terms of how to build that collaboration in practice. But maybe if
go ahead. It's not just an ambition, it's a real need, and we see it how fragile it is, since it's. For now, I see all the organizations, our sister organizations, are really well run, but on really tight ships. You know, it's really fragile, this system. It's not built on like American DGA, which is built on 80 years of experience and strong economical, foundations. We float in the wind in Europe, and that is one, in my opinion, one of the major factors why European cinema is barely competitive with other world cinemas.
I would add one point to this. I'm sorry, I'm speaking too much, but Costa was referring to how Korean cinema was at some point built and became really visible at an international level. This was the result, indeed, as he pointed out, of a very strong and intense national policy, which had different aspects. It had to do with regulation of the local markets and national audiences, but it also had to do with a very ambitious soft power policy for music, cinema, TV content that we see today, 20 years later, after this new wave of Korean filmmakers that emerged 15 to 20 years ago. But it was really like an all-encompassing strategy that even had, if I'm not mistaken, technological elements that had to do with the technology carrying this sort of works across the nation and across the globe. So these are, sometimes it's really difficult to envisage how we can arrive to a very ambitious result without having such detailed strategies and enforcement behind it. Costa, you raised your hand, and then Rebecca, sorry.
No, I would like to say, Clement mentioned the DGA in the United States, but the States don't have only DGA, which is very important, they do a great job, but they have also the MPA, the government organization. It goes around the country for movies. I mean, it's important. I don't know if it is the other problem we mentioned today. Just to give you a small personal example, I was shooting in Chicago, and I was invited in a university. And I spoke about, of course, the French cinema, and I spoke also European cinema. And they said, Europeans have a cinema? How is the European cinema? So they knew a little bit about the French movement, really a little bit, but nothing about European cinema. So a few days later, I brought movies, a German movie, and I said, show them. And they show it, and they were very surprised to see that there was European good cinema, a great cinema even. I think that's another problem we have, because we spoke a lot today about the how we do around the world. We are not present around the world. We're a little bit present by some fans who try to show here and there a movie from different countries, and a movie which are awarded and known. But there's much more movies than that in Europe. And this is, nobody knows about them.
𝗂𝗶𝗃𝗍, you wanted to come in? And then
well, actually, speaking to Costa's point, I think France, because they've put such a lot of effort into promoting their own industry, they do actually publicize their films better than Europe does as a whole. And I think that was a national endeavor, and it was about keeping the French language going. And and the CNC has done a very, very effective job in both its goal for keeping French language going and for making a lot of French cinema. And it's a very, very strong brand because it's been built up over a number of years. And in a way, it's like it's been going longer than the Korean thing, and it's very effective. But I think as a producer, half of my time is thinking about how it must be your role as a producer is about getting your film seen. And I think, you know, in a way, if you're unable to get your film seen, then you're perhaps not actually functioning properly as a producer. Your quest has to be getting it out there. I think, you know, I always see myself as the first audience for a film, and if I have issues with the film, then I must complain as a member of the audience. And I think always that if you're not connected with the audience as a producer, then you're not really doing your job. So it's like we have to as producers, but you're obviously all from other parts of the industry, but that's what I feel the producer needs to do, and they need support to be able to do that job. And I think entertaining the world is what we have to do.
That's a good point. Edith, go ahead.
I wanted to also, the Korea is a good example, but it became also very commercial cinema, and, you know, it was a totally different aim for this. But we could have an example also from Europe, what is Denmark. You know, Denmark did the same thing.
Sure.
They had a strategy, and they still have this kind of common understanding in the society, filmmakers versus government and I don't know, some other organization who agree, you know, how they develop the film in a certain amount of years. So, you know, they started the school, they put more money into the production, and, you know, the rest is known to all of us. It's a very, very strong cinema apart from Korea. So, but yeah, I wanted to say also that the one thing is, what we are talking a lot in EFADs is, and we have the vision paper for 2030. And one point in there is that the film funds should look more closely how much money we're putting into the promotion. You know, ideally, the half of the money what goes to production should go also to promotion. Obviously, the obvious question is, where do we get this money? But, you know, if you balance the thing out, then, you know, it should be half of the production money should really go to promote the film. Rather than putting more and more money into the production, we should really start to think, you know, how to divide the funds between production and promotion. Very hard to do, but it's in our paper. And
maybe consider also the right to failure to some extent.
Yes, at least try and we failed again, yes.
I would just like to say, because you said the commercial films.
Commercialized.
Yes, but the commercial movies, they can help also the other movies to be done. If there's no commercial movies, the producer cannot do movies. So it's a kind of balance to have between both. The ones are necessary as the other ones. The worst thing is to do only commercial movies, to try to do only commercial movies, which my feeling is the problem of the platforms today. The only thing that addresses them to do commercial movies.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's an interesting point, and I'm keeping an eye on the questions coming at us from the chat, and some of these we've already touched to, so I will not put them to you. But I think as a closing, because you've been very active for an hour and a half already and very engaged, so we won't keep you tons of time longer. However, maybe one question that was raised about what actually is European cinema as a concept, maybe not that question generally, but more specifically, is it possible that the common feature of European cinema has to do with the production conditions and particularly with co-productions, and how critical they remain to the existence of a lively cinema landscape across the European Union. How, I mean, of course, it's a pretty basic question, but how critical do you think co-productions remain for European cinema in the near future? Whomever wants to go first.
Yeah.
I think co-production. Sorry, Clement.
No, just I wanted to add, because it popped in my when we talk about co-production on our board, it's always in the context of that co-production in Europe, because it became so successful, it can be seen as an institution, you know. So to add to Pauline's question, what is the function in the future of co-production as an institution of European cinema? Maybe Rebecca, then you can go. Yeah.
I think as a producer, co-production is a wonderful thing, because it means it makes you understand. It just brings you to working in other countries and understand how other countries' cinema is actually. Through the years I've been co-producing, I've learned more about other ways and it's introduced me to being more of an internationalist, actually. And I think that's one thing that's interesting about European films, is that it is actually international, because European films are largely cross-pollinated and fertilized by each other's films. And I think, so, you know, within the filmmaking community, I think it's been a really fundamentally important thing. I think it is a characteristic of European films that they are co-produced. The other thing I would say is that European films are all seem to be very personal to, you know, there is something making a European film allows you to make a personal and sort of intimate contribution to cinema. And it's funny, I just see that as a European, as a signifier of a European film.
Very good.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Rebecca. I think European co-productions epitomizes what Europe cinema is about, or should be about. When some people ask me, what do you think is the main achievement of the 30 years of the Creative Europe program? I said that it has really created a community of creators, producers, distributors that talk to each other, work with each other, understand each other, learn from each other. And it's something extremely intangible. You cannot assess it based on, but I think it's in the end what makes you as industry and creators truly Europeans. And I think we are very proud that through this European program, we have contributed to create that mindset of being open to work with others, to learn from the others. So I don't know, I think it's, as I said, for me, this is, it boils down to the essence and what we think we should be supporting through this Europe.
We certainly have, as you know, a lot of expectations with such a doubling of the budget and a commitment, also a political commitment from the Parliament and member states to securing this new envelope of means for the Commission to implement its support program is quite symbolic. Also, I don't know if any one of you wants to conclude, say a few words to wrap things up. But what I could say is that in an hour and a half, it seems I'm struck, like Rebecca, of the space that film literacy took in our conversation, and that clearly there is a widespread concern in terms of relationship with the audience. I know we talk a lot about it sometimes within FERA in terms of transparency from global streamers on their audience data, for example, but it is true that there is a political thinking that needs to happen in how we secure the, let's say, the building taste, a little bit like we would do with foods, because it's indeed such an important cultural element of our European culture, cinema and food in a way. that's maybe that's what the soft power of the European Union is all about.
Yeah, maybe I just want to say this, yeah, that we have to really take care of our creators more. And again, you know, this it's a mirror reflection, but I do think what this crisis have taught me personally is that somehow we forget, you know, we do know that it's a director who does the film and they are the essence of the soil, but it taught me personally just to take more care about the directors in the film and the thing.
I think that's very much appreciated. Costa, go ahead.
To conclude, I would like to say that the European cinema should be like the European culture. Since thousands of years now, we continue. Of course, we have co-productions of every kind, through books, through any kind of art. Of course, we have some awful years. We kill each other, we destroy, we create camps and everything. But now we are together. We should come to that kind of culture, which is an important culture, and go on with it as a union. And I think the union itself, the Commission must help really on that, not to take care only about economics. The culture, it does look to be very present in the politics of the Commission of the European Union. It's secondary. And that has to change also, I believe. And the cinema, it's one way, you know, to meet each other, to know each other, and to accept each other before liking and being friendly with the other.
Many thanks for this, Costa. Clement, do you want to close down?
Maybe before we finish, maybe we give word also to Lucia to say final words.
Wow, what a responsibility to close this session. I think I will close. I think over the years from the European Commission, we have been listening to you. I think this is what has possibly made the success of the program. That is a program that is co-created with the creators and the industry. It's for the industry, but it's, I would say, and co-created. And the message I would like to convey is that we would like to continue in, the message I would like to convey is that we would like to continue in this good conversation spirit that has guided us so far. And we would like to continue those conversations in the future, because I think that's the only way that we can still make that European support relevant for you, but also for the audiences that we were discussing before. So I think that's what I would like to say from the EU perspective. We are here to listen to you.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank all of our panelists for a great contribution. I really also enjoyed this talk as also to participate in. I think that our viewers also got a lot out of this panel. We are invited Lichter Film Festival